The morning sun cast gentle light across the floating gardens of New Harmony. Children played in the crystal parks, while their parents tended to the growing towers that reached toward the sky. It was a peaceful world, home to 2 million Zephyrians, who spent their days creating art, studying the stars, and building beautiful things. Veltar stood in his office high above the main city. As colony administrator, he watched over this world and its people. The Zephyrians were not warriors. They had never needed to be. For 300 years, they had lived in peace, far from the troubles that plagued other parts of the galaxy. That peace ended at exactly 0847 local time. The communication console in Veltar's office began flashing red. Emergency signals poured in from the outer sensor stations that watched the edge of their solar system. His assistant, Moraken, rushed into the room with terror in her large, dark eyes. "Administrator," she said, her voice shaking. Veltar felt his stomach drop. "How many ships?" 57 vessels, sir." They are massive. Our computers identify them as Kytherian warships." The name sent ice through Veltar's veins. Every civilized being in the galaxy knew of the Kytherians. They were raiders who swept across star systems like a plague. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. Entire species had vanished after meeting the Kytherian fleets. "How long until they reach us?" Veltar asked. Moraken checked her readings again, hoping she had made a mistake. 4 hours at their current speed, sir. 4 hours. Veltar looked out at his beautiful city, at the children playing in the gardens below. In 4 hours, all of this might be gone. He activated the colony's emergency communication system. His voice reached every Zephyrian on New Harmony. "Citizens, this is Administrator Veltar. We have detected an approaching hostile fleet. All citizens must prepare for immediate evacuation. Follow your emergency protocols. Stay calm and help your neighbors." But even as he spoke the words, Veltar knew the truth. New Harmony had only 12 small ships. They were research vessels and light patrol craft, not warships. The Zephyrians had no real military because they had never needed one. Against 57 Kytherian dreadnoughts, their tiny fleet would last minutes. The evacuation ships could carry perhaps 50,000 people. 2 million Zephyrians lived on New Harmony. Veltar opened communication channels to the wider galaxy. He sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council, to the powerful Draconis Empire, to anyone who might help. The responses came back quickly. All said the same thing: "We are sorry, but our forces are too far away. We cannot reach you in time." The Draconis Empire was honest about their position. "New Harmony has no strategic value to us. We will not risk our ships for your world." The Merchant Consortium was more polite but equally unhelpful. "We have no military treaty with the Zephyrian colonies. Our hands are tied by law." Hours passed like minutes. The Kytherian fleet grew larger on the sensors. Veltar could see them now on the long-range viewers. Dark, angular ships that looked like weapons themselves. They moved in perfect formation, like predators closing in on helpless prey. At the edge of the system, the lead Kytherian ship sent a message. It was brief, and came in the harsh, guttural language of the raiders. "Surrender now. Prepare for processing. Resistance will result in total extermination." Veltar had heard about processing from the few survivors of other Kytherian raids. They sorted people like cargo. The strong became slaves. The weak were killed. The smart were kept alive to serve their new masters. Everyone else simply disappeared. The Kytherian ships reached the outer planets of the system. They moved past the gas giants without stopping. Their target was clear: New Harmony itself, the only inhabited world. As the enemy fleet approached, something strange happened. All of New Harmony's communication systems went silent. The Kytherians had activated powerful jammers that blocked all signals leaving the planet. No more calls for help could get out. The colony was cut off from the rest of the galaxy. War Commander Scarth, leader of the Catherian fleet, opened a channel to New Harmony. His image appeared on every screen in the colony. A tall, reptilian creature, with scales like black armor and eyes that glowed with cruel intelligence. "I am Scarth of the Catherian Empire," he said. "Your world now belongs to us. You will submit to processing, or you will die. You have 1 hour to decide." Veltar looked around his command center. His staff stared at him with hope in their eyes, waiting for him to find a solution. But there was no solution. No help was coming. The most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had abandoned them. The hour passed in silence. When it ended, the first Kytherian ships entered New Harmony's atmosphere. They were dropships, carrying thousands of soldiers. The invasion had begun. Veltar watched from his command center as the enemy ships landed in the main city squares. Catherian soldiers poured out. Tall, armored figures carrying weapons that could cut through steel. The few Zephyrian security guards who tried to resist were swept aside like leaves in a storm. "Sir," Morrigan said quietly, "what do we do now?" Veltar looked at his assistant, then at his staff, then out at his dying world. The beautiful, floating gardens were already burning. The crystal parks lay in ruins. Children cried as soldiers forced their families into metal cages. "Now," he said, "we try to save who we can." But in his heart, Veltar knew the truth. New Harmony was lost. Its people were lost. And no one, in the galaxy, cared enough to help them. The Catherians had won before the battle even began. The first day of the occupation was chaos. Kytherian soldiers moved through New Harmony like a dark tide, forcing families from their homes and herding them toward large metal structures that had been dropped from the sky. These processing centers were nothing more than prison camps, surrounded by energy barriers that killed anyone who touched them. Veltar and the surviving government officials had retreated to the underground emergency bunkers beneath the city. From there, they watched through hidden cameras as their world was torn apart. The beautiful floating gardens had been burned to ash. The crystal towers that had taken decades to grow lay broken on the ground. The orbital defense platforms lasted 18 minutes, reported Security Chief Nixtal, his voice hollow with defeat. The Catherians destroyed them all, without losing a single ship. Veltar nodded grimly. He had expected this. The Zephyrians were builders and thinkers, not fighters. Their military was really just a few patrol ships meant to watch for asteroids and rescue lost travelers. Against the Kytherians, they might as well have thrown stones. Above ground, some Zephyrians tried to fight back. A group of young security officers had barricaded themselves in the central communications building. They used hunting rifles and mining explosives to attack Catherian patrols. Their bravery was admirable, but their weapons barely scratched the enemy's armor. "Report from Sector 7, Nixtal said, reading from his console. "The resistance group there has been eliminated. 23 casualties. No Kytherian losses." The pattern repeated across the planet. Desperate Zephyrians would make a stand, fight with whatever they could find, and die uselessly against superior firepower. The Catherians didn't even consider it a real fight. To them, it was just target practice. War Commander Scarth had set up his headquarters in what used to be the colony's main government building. From there, he directed the processing of the population. The Catherians worked with cold efficiency, separating families and sorting people by age, strength, and education. The old and the sick were taken away first. Everyone knew what that meant. In the bunkers, young engineer Kira Lex refused to give up. She was barely 20 years old, fresh from the technical academy, but she had an idea that might save them. "Administrator," she said to Veltar, "the Kytherians are jamming our normal communications, But I think I can build something they won't expect. What kind of something? Veltar asked. Kira Lex showed him a collection of spare parts she had gathered from the bunker's equipment rooms. It should be able to punch through their jamming. Nixtal shook his head. Even if you can get a message out, who will listen? The Galactic Council has already written us off. The other powers don't care. Maybe someone else will hear us, Kira Lex said. The galaxy is big. There might be people out there who haven't given up on helping others. It took her 6 hours to build the transmitter. While she worked, the reports from the surface grew worse. The Kytherians had started public executions to break the spirit of anyone still thinking about resistance. They had also begun destroying the colony's historical records and art collections, erasing 3 centuries of Zephyrian culture. When Kira Lex finished her device, it was a crude thing made of salvaged parts and hope. But when she activated it, the readings showed it was working. Broadcasting on all emergency frequencies, she reported. The signal is getting past their jamming. Veltar helped her record a message that was both a plea and a final testament to their civilization. This is New Harmony, Zephyrian colony, under attack by Kytherian raiders. 2 million civilians need immediate evacuation. We have wounded and dying. Our defenses have fallen. If anyone receives this message, please remember that we tried to live in peace. Please remember that we were here. They broadcast the message on repeat, sending it out into the vast emptiness of space. But the galaxy seemed as silent as ever. On the second day, the Kytherians announced new rules. Anyone caught outside during curfew hours would be shot. Anyone caught with weapons would be executed along with their family. Anyone caught helping others escape would be fed to the Kytherian war beasts. Creatures that were kept hungry for exactly this purpose. Despite the threats, some Zephyrians continued to resist. Teacher Mordain organized a group that helped families hide their children in the old mining tunnels. Engineer Yelkorth sabotaged Kytherian vehicles when he could. Dr. Rinnala treated wounded resistance fighters in secret medical stations. But for every small victory, the Kytherians responded with greater cruelty. When they discovered the hidden children, they didn't just capture them, they executed their parents in the public squares as an example. When they caught Yelkorth, they made his death slow and public. In the bunkers, Veltar watched his people suffer and die while he remained safe underground. The guilt ate at him like acid. He was their leader, but he could not protect them. He could not save them. He could only watch. Sir, Morrigan said on the third day, we're receiving a response to our quantum transmission. Veltar's heart leaped with hope. The Council? No, sir. It's from someone called the Terran Colonial Command. They say they received our message and are evaluating the situation. Terrans? Nixtal frowned. I've never heard of them. They're new to the galaxy, Morrigan explained, checking her databases. Made first contact about 20 years ago. What do they say, exactly? Veltar asked. Morrigan read from her screen. Message received and confirmed. Terran task force en route. Maintain position. Help is coming. The words seemed too good to be true. Help was coming? From a species no one had ever heard of? How far away is their nearest base? Veltar asked. Morrigan checked the star charts. Sir, according to our records, the nearest human colony is over 1,000 light-years away. Even with the fastest ships, it would take weeks to reach us. Veltar felt his brief hope crumble. In weeks, there would be nothing left of New Harmony but empty buildings and mass graves. Kira Lex looked up from her transmitter. Maybe they have faster ships than we think, but even she didn't sound convinced. As the third day ended and the fourth began, the quantum transmitter fell silent. The Kytherians had finally located it and destroyed it, along with the building where Kira Lex had hidden it. Now they were truly alone. Cut off from the galaxy, abandoned by the powers that could have helped, and facing an enemy that had never shown mercy to anyone. In his command bunker, Veltar stared at the dark screens and wondered if the mysterious humans had ever existed at all. Perhaps the message had been a dream, a wish his desperate mind had created. Above ground, War Commander Scarth prepared for the final phase of the conquest. Soon, New Harmony would be just another trophy in the Catherian Empire's collection of conquered worlds. War Commander Scarth stood on the balcony of his headquarters, looking out over the conquered city of New Harmony. 3 days had passed since the invasion began, and he was growing impatient. The Zephyrians were taking too long to process. Some were still hiding in tunnels and abandoned buildings. Others continued their pathetic attempts at resistance. Scarth was tired of wasting time on these weak creatures. He activated his communicator and spoke to his officers. New orders. Kill anyone who resists. Kill anyone who helps those who resist. Kill anyone who looks like they might resist. I want this world quiet by tomorrow. Cram. Cram. Crams. The result was immediate and horrible. Kytherian soldiers swept through the remaining free areas of the city with orders to shoot first and ask questions never. Families who had been hiding in their homes were dragged into the streets. Children cried as soldiers separated them from their parents forever. In the underground bunkers, Veltar and his staff watched the massacre through their hidden cameras. Every screen showed the same thing: his people dying while he sat safely underground, unable to help. Sector 12 is reporting heavy casualties, Nixtal said, his voice barely a whisper. The residential districts are. They're gone, sir. Everyone in them. Veltar closed his eyes and tried not to think about the families he knew in Sector 12. The Mortel clan, with their 5 young children. Old Kexrin, who made the most beautiful sculptures in the colony. Teacher Dalmora, who had taught 3 generations of Zephyrian children. All gone now. Sir, Morrican said hesitantly. The council members are asking if we should surrender. Completely. Maybe, if we give up all resistance, they'll stop the killing. Several voices in the bunker spoke up in agreement. At least some of us will live, one council member said. Isn't that better than watching them all die? Veltar understood their thinking, but he had studied the Kytherian records. Surrender didn't save lives. It just changed how people died. Above ground, the few remaining resistance cells made increasingly desperate attacks. A group of teenagers, armed with hunting rifles, ambushed a Kytherian patrol. They managed to damage one soldier's armor before being cut down by energy weapons. Their bodies were left in the street as a warning to others. Dr. Rinnala, still running her secret medical station, tried to treat the wounded from these attacks. But for every person she saved, 10 more died. Her medical supplies were running out, and the Kytherians were getting closer to finding her. Young engineer Kira Lex had been captured while trying to repair her quantum transmitter. The Kytherians threw her into one of the processing centers, but not before breaking both her arms to make sure she couldn't build anything else. She sat in the corner of her cage, cradling her injured limbs and wondering if the mysterious humans had ever received her message. As the 4th day dawned, Scarth made his announcement. The surviving Zephyrians would hear it whether they wanted to or not, because it was broadcast on every speaker in the city. People of this world. Scarth's harsh voice echoed across the ruins. You have tested my patience long enough. Tomorrow at dawn, we will begin the final cleansing. Atmospheric processors will be deployed across your planet. The air itself will be changed to suit our needs. In the bunkers, the technical staff explained what this meant. The atmospheric processors would release gases that Kytherians could breathe, but that would kill every other form of life on the planet. Every Zephyrian still alive, hiding in bunkers, captured in processing centers, or somehow still free, would suffocate slowly as their world's air turned to poison. How long do we have after they start the processors? Veltar asked. 6 hours, maybe 8 for those underground, came the answer. Then everyone dies. The announcement had its intended effect. Over the next few hours, Thousands of Zephyrians emerged from hiding and surrendered. Parents carried their children to the processing centers, choosing slavery over watching them die from poisoned air. The elderly walked slowly toward the Catherian camps, knowing they would not live to see another sunset but hoping their sacrifice might buy mercy for the young. In his bunker, Veltar faced the hardest decision of his life. His staff looked at him with desperate eyes, waiting for orders that might save them. But there were no such orders. There was no salvation coming. "Sir," Nixtal said quietly, "maybe we should surrender too. At least we'll live to see another day." "To see another day as slaves," Veltar replied. "To see our culture destroyed, our children raised as servants to creatures who see us as animals." "But we'll be alive," Morriken said. "Isn't that worth something?" Veltar looked around the bunker at these good people who had served their colony faithfully. They deserved better than this choice between death and slavery. They deserved a rescue that wasn't coming. As night fell on the fourth day, the Kytherian ships in orbit began moving into position for the atmospheric processing. Massive cylindrical devices were lowered toward the planet's surface. Each one was designed to change the air in an area hundreds of miles wide. Veltar stood before the main communication console and composed what he knew would be his final message to the galaxy. Even though their quantum transmitter was gone, the bunker had one old emergency beacon that might reach nearby star systems. "This is Administrator Veltar of New Harmony," he recorded. "Our world falls tomorrow. Our people die tomorrow. We fought as best we could, but we were not strong enough. If anyone receives this message after we are gone, remember that we tried to live in peace. Remember that we created beautiful things. Remember that we loved our children and wanted them to see the stars." He paused, looking around the bunker one last time at the faces of his people. "And remember that when we called for help, no one came." As he prepared to send the message, alarms began sounding throughout the Catherian fleet. Something was happening in space, above New Harmony. Something that made the raiders pause their preparations. But in the bunker deep underground, Veltar heard nothing. He activated the emergency beacon and sent his final words into the darkness between the stars. Never knowing that at that very moment, help was closer than he had ever dared to hope. The darkest hour was nearly over. War Commander Scarth stood on his command deck, staring at readings that made no sense. Energy signatures were appearing throughout the system. Not at the edges where ships normally came from hyperspace, but everywhere at once. For the first time since the invasion began, Scarth felt something he had not experienced in decades of conquest. Fear. At exactly 0347 local time on the fifth day, reality tore open, above New Harmony. War Commander Scarth had been reviewing the final preparations for atmospheric processing when his command deck exploded into chaos. Alarms screamed from every console. His sensor operators shouted over each other as they tried to make sense of what their instruments were telling them. Energy spikes throughout the system. Hyperspace signatures everywhere. Unknown vessels emerging directly from... The communications officer never finished his sentence. The main viewer flickered and showed something impossible. 12 massive ships had appeared in space around New Harmony. Not at the edge of the system where hyperspace jumps normally happened, but right there, practically on top of the Kytherian fleet. The ships were strange. Smaller than Catherian dreadnoughts but built like floating fortresses. Their hulls were covered with weapon systems that Scarth didn't recognize. Along their sides, words were written in glowing letters. Terran Colonial Marines. Impossible, Scarth whispered. No one can jump that close to a planet. The gravity well would tear a ship apart. Before anyone could answer, every communication channel in the system activated at once. A voice spoke in perfect Kytherian, with an accent that was crisp and cold as winter. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of Task Force Vengeance, Terran Colonial Marines. You have exactly 60 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from Zephyrian space, or we will remove you by force. Vevry Anderley. We an Regent several. Scarth looked at the 12 human ships facing his fleet of 57 dreadnoughts. The aliens were either insane or incredibly confident. "This is War Commander Scarth of the Kytherian Empire," he replied. "You will withdraw immediately or be destroyed. We claim this world by right of conquest." The human admiral's response was immediate. "Your 60 seconds just became 0 seconds. All units, weapons free. Time to show these bastards why you don't mess with humans." What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for generations. The Terran ships opened fire with weapons that defied everything the Kytherians thought they knew about space combat. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, they launched solid projectiles at tremendous speed. Railgun rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed slammed into Kytherian shields with devastating effect. Scarth's flagship shuddered under impacts that should have been impossible. "Shields at 70%, his engineering officer reported. "How are they penetrating our barriers?" But the orbital battle was only part of the human assault. As the ships fought above, thousands of small objects began streaking down through New Harmony's atmosphere like falling stars. They were drop pods, each one containing a single Terran Marine. The pods didn't land in empty fields or safe zones like a normal military would choose. They dropped directly onto Kytherian positions, turning occupied buildings into instant battlefields. Master Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez felt his drop pod slam into the roof of the main processing center where thousands of Zephyrians waited for death. As the pod's sides blew away, he rolled out with his assault rifle already firing. 2 Kytherian guards went down before they even knew they were under attack. "Alpha Company, sound off." Rodriguez spoke into his helmet communicator. "Second squad in position. Third squad, encountering heavy resistance. Fourth squad, civilians secured." The Marines had studied the layout of every Kytherian position from their ship's sensors during the approach. They knew exactly where the enemies were, where the civilians were, and how to tell the difference. Rodriguez moved through the processing center like a storm of controlled violence. His rifle fired armor-piercing rounds that could punch through Kytherian battlesuits. His helmet display showed him the locations of every friendly and enemy unit in the building through quantum-linked communications that updated in real time. A Kytherian soldier tried to use a group of Zephyrian children as shields. Rodriguez put 3 rounds center mass before the alien could even finish shouting his threats. The children looked up at this strange new arrival in terror, not understanding that their nightmare was finally ending. "Easy, kids," Rodriguez said, switching to the Zephyrian language his neural implants had learned during the journey. "The bad guys are done hurting people today." Across the planet, similar scenes played out as Marine units struck every Kytherian position simultaneously. They fought with a coordination that seemed impossible until the aliens realized what they were facing. Soldiers whose minds were linked through quantum communicators, sharing tactical information instantaneously across the entire battlefield. In the underground bunkers, Veltar and his staff stared at their screens in amazement. The hidden cameras showed Terran Marines moving through their city like avenging angels, systematically dismantling the occupation force that had seemed invincible just hours before. "How are they doing this?" Nixtal whispered. On the screens, they watched a Marine squad eliminate an entire Kytherian platoon in less than 30 seconds. The humans moved with deadly precision, each one knowing exactly where his teammates were and what they were doing. "Look at their equipment," Moraken said, pointing to a screen. "Those weapons, that armor, it's like nothing I've ever seen." The Marines wore powered armor that enhanced their strength and speed. Their weapons were designed to punch through any known form of protection. But most impressive was their tactics. They fought like they had been preparing for this exact battle their entire lives. In space, Admiral Chen watched the tactical display as her ships tore apart the Kytherian fleet. The aliens had superior numbers, but the humans had superior everything else. "Ma'am," her tactical officer reported. "Put him through," Chen ordered. Scarth's image appeared on the screen, his reptilian features twisted with desperation. Admiral, we can discuss terms. The only terms, Chen interrupted, are your immediate withdrawal from this system. You have 5 minutes to start jumping to hyperspace, or my Marines will demonstrate why Terrans don't negotiate with slavers. You cannot defeat our entire fleet with 12 ships. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Wanna bet? On the planet's surface, the Marines had secured every major population center in less than 2 hours. The Catherians found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Kira Lex, her arms still broken from her capture, watched through the bars of her processing center as a Terran Marine calmly walked through the facility, eliminating guards and unlocking cages. When he reached her cell, he knelt down to examine her injuries. Medical evac needed at Processing Center 7, he spoke into his communicator. Multiple wounded civilians. Priority care required. Who are you? Kira Lex asked in wonder. The Marine's face was hidden behind his helmet, but his voice was gentle when he answered. Someone who got your message, kid. Help's here. In orbit, Scarth watched his fleet crumble under the human assault. Half his ships were already destroyed or crippled. The survivors were being systematically hunted down by vessels that seemed to anticipate their every move. War Commander, his communication officer said, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 ships. Scarth's world was ending, and he couldn't understand how. The Catherians had conquered 100 systems with the same tactics that were failing so completely against these unknown humans. Order general withdrawal, he finally said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. All ships to hyperspace. We retreat. But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. As the surviving Catherian ships limped toward the edge of the system, her voice followed them on all channels. This is Admiral Chen to all Catherian forces. You are banned from this system permanently. Any Catherian ship detected in Zephyrian space will be destroyed without warning. Spread the word to your empire. Earth does not negotiate with slavers, and Earth does not forget. The message that followed would echo across the galaxy for years to come. And tell them that when someone asks Earth for help, Earth answers. The orbital battle above New Harmony lasted exactly 6 hours and 23 minutes. When it ended, 34 Catherian ships had been destroyed, and the remaining survivors fled into hyperspace with their mighty fleet in ruins. Not a single Terran vessel had been lost. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last enemy ship disappear into the darkness between stars. Around her, the bridge crew worked quietly to assess the battle damage and coordinate with ground forces. The humans had fought like they had been born for this moment. But Chen knew the truth. They had been preparing for it since the day they first learned about the Catherians. Ma'am, her communications officer reported, we're receiving surrender signals from the remaining ground forces. Master Sergeant Rodriguez reports all processing centers secured, civilians evacuated to safety. Chen nodded. The Marines had performed exactly as expected. In 6 hours, they had completely dismantled an occupation force that had terrorized an entire planet. On the surface of New Harmony, Veltar emerged from his underground bunker for the first time in 5 days. The city around him was damaged but not destroyed. The Catherian vehicles sat abandoned in the streets. The processing centers stood empty, their energy barriers dark and silent. And everywhere, there were humans. The Terran Marines were smaller than most galactic species. But there was something about them that made Veltar understand why the mighty Catherians had fled in terror. These beings moved with quiet confidence, like predators who knew they were the most dangerous things in their environment. A human approached Veltar as he stood in the ruins of the government plaza. The alien's armor was marked with the insignia of a senior officer, and when he removed his helmet, Veltar saw a face that was both young and old. Young in years but aged by experience. Administrator Veltar? The human asked in perfect Zephyrian. I'm Master Sergeant Rodriguez. Are you injured? No, Veltar said, still not quite believing what he was seeing. You're really here. You came. Rodriguez smiled, and it was the expression full of warmth despite the weapon he carried. Someone asked for help. We were able to give it. Around them, other Marines were helping Zephyrian civilians return to their homes. Human medics treated the wounded with equipment that was more advanced than anything in Zephyrian hospitals. Engineers worked to restore power and communication systems that the Catherians had damaged. "How did you know?" Veltar asked. "How did you know to come here?" "We got your message," Rodriguez explained. Young engineer named Kira Lex built quite a transmitter. Punched right through the Catherian jamming and reached our listening posts. Veltar felt tears in his eyes. "But you were so far away." "We have efficient transportation," Rodriguez said diplomatically. He didn't explain that the Terran fleet had used experimental jump drives that could fold space itself, allowing them to appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours instead of weeks. As the day progressed, the scale of the human operation became clear. This hadn't been a desperate rescue mission thrown together at the last minute. Task Force Vengeance had been specifically designed and equipped to fight Catherians. Every weapon, every tactic, every piece of equipment had been chosen to counter the raiders' known strengths. Kira Lex, her broken arms now in healing casts provided by human medics, sat with Rodriguez in what remained of the communication center where she had built her quantum transmitter. "Why?" she asked him. "Why did your people come so far to help strangers?" Rodriguez thought about the question for a moment. Around them, his Marines continued their work of cleaning up the city and caring for the wounded. "Kid," he finally said, "humans have been fighting for thousands of years. We've fought for land, for resources, for stupid reasons and smart ones. The only fights worth having are the ones where you're protecting people who can't protect themselves." He gestured toward the street outside, where Zephyrian children played under the watchful eyes of human soldiers. "We might as well fight for something that matters." In the weeks that followed, news of the Battle of New Harmony spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The story grew with each telling, but the core facts remained the same. An unknown species, called humans, had appeared from nowhere, defeated the seemingly invincible Catherians, and then quietly begun helping the Zephyrians rebuild their world. The Galactic Council sent diplomatic missions to make contact with these mysterious Terrans. The Draconis Empire demanded to know how the humans had acquired such advanced military technology. The Merchant Consortium wanted to establish trade relationships immediately. But the humans seemed more interested in talking to the smaller species, the ones who had been ignored by the major powers. They established embassies with the peaceful Zephyrians. They signed mutual defense treaties with colonies that had never been considered important enough to protect. 3 months after the rescue, Admiral Chen stood once again on New Harmony, this time as an honored guest at the ceremony dedicating a memorial to those who had died during the occupation. Veltar had asked her to speak at the ceremony, to help his people understand who these rescuers really were. "People of New Harmony," Chen said to the gathered crowd. "You asked us why we came. The answer is simple. In all our history, humans have learned one thing above all others. Evil succeeds when good people do nothing." She paused, looking out at the faces of the Zephyrians, faces that no longer held the terror and despair she had seen in the intelligence reports. "You called for help when no one else would listen. You fought back when others would have surrendered. You protected your children and cared for your neighbors even when it seemed hopeless. You showed us what civilization really means." Chen's words were broadcast across the galaxy, and they marked a turning point in galactic politics. Suddenly, species that had been written off as weak or unimportant found themselves with powerful protectors. Colonies that had been abandoned by the major powers discovered they had friends who would answer their calls for help. The Catherian Empire, for the first time in its history, found itself afraid. Their raids became less frequent as word spread of the terrible humans who appeared from nowhere to defend the innocent. Some Catherian commanders refused missions entirely, claiming they would not risk facing the Terran Marines. Back on New Harmony, life slowly returned to normal. The floating gardens grew again. New crystal towers reached toward the stars. Children played in parks that were no longer afraid of raiders dropping from the sky. But now, when young Zephyrians looked up at those stars, they saw something different than their parents had. They saw a galaxy where help could come from unexpected places, where someone was always listening for calls of distress, where the strong would protect the weak not for profit or power but simply because it was the right thing to do. Veltar often visited the memorial where Admiral Chen had spoken. The words carved into its crystal surface had become famous throughout the galaxy. When someone asks for help, and you are able to give it, that is what civilized beings do. Below those words, in smaller script, was a simple phrase that had become the unofficial motto of humanity's role in galactic affairs. Earth remembers, Earth answers, Earth protects. And in the darkness between the stars, Terran listening posts continued their endless vigil, waiting for the next call for help from those who had nowhere else to turn. Because the humans had learned something that the older, more established civilizations had forgotten. Sometimes, the best way to make friends is to be the kind of person others can count on when everything goes wrong. The galaxy was a safer place now, not because it was more peaceful, but because everyone knew that somewhere out there, Earth's warriors were ready to drop from the heavens whenever justice needed to be served.